Whew, all I ever really want to do is read. Okay, no, that's not true. I like to fuck as well, a lot, and I do. But speaking of reading, so I'm so happy about this, and I've been sharing them on Twitter. I'm actually going to get into something else as far as all this goes. But regardless, well, I like writing too. Actually, I like writing a lot. But there's a lot of things I like to do. But one of the things that I feel like, I always make time to fuck, however many, an hour or two a day, working out, an hour or whatever a day. It's a busy life, no doubt. But I feel like there is literally never enough time to read, not to the satisfaction that I would like to. And I was very fortunate to recently get another order in and back of rare books that I've been collecting, frankly, my whole life, but certainly in recent years. And I've been sharing some of these that I just gotten back from a place that I get them professionally scanned. I have to mail them and everything. It's a little bit of work, and then I have to convert them. I have software, PDF converting software, where I convert it to a size smaller than 50 megabytes. That way, they can be, sent to a Kindle e-reader or any e-reader, for that matter. So if when you download these, because I make them available on MediaFire, of course, I've gotten in trouble for that in the past, ironically, from another fucking egoist. Fuck you, Trevor Blake. But he didn't like that I put his books out there. Wait a minute, I thought there wasn't property, but your IP. Anyway. No, I know. I understand the egoist concept of property. Don't worry, even though it's not what everybody, or the common concept of property. Regardless of all that. So I've been sharing some of these books, in fact, just on Twitter, if you want to find it. And I know that a lot of you have downloaded this already, because MediaFire gives me statistics. It doesn't tell me who, it doesn't say at all who downloaded it. And I don't really care. Okay, I'm just glad that the world gets to enjoy these books just as I want to. But I actually put out The Private Life of Julius Caesar, which is a book by someone who I think is, I don't want to call him a philosopher, a psychologist, somebody, but he certainly has a philosophy. In fact, there's the book, The Emotions of Normal People, which is a lot easier to get. But William Moulton Marston, who also created Wonder Woman, like literally created and for years wrote Wonder Woman. He had a book that came out originally in 1932, I think it was. It's called Venus With Us. And then they did, and I don't know all of the differences between the two. I know there are some differences, but as far as I understand it, the later edition of the book, finding a copy of Venus With Us, is you can sort of find that book. Okay. And partly because there's a point to all this, folks, and we have great questions to get into. In fact, we're going to get into a subject of reading, something that I've been reading recently. It's going to probably shock you. It's not what I'm talking about right now, but just bringing all this up. This book, okay, the book Venus With Us came out in hardcover. All right, which a hardcover book has a much greater chance of surviving, okay, the literal centuries almost, than just about anything else. There was an edition that would come out in, I want to say 52, 54, something like that, called, he retitled it, The Private Life of Julius Caesar. Okay, William Marston would retitle it. This is after he became famous for, basically his work on Wonder Woman, even though nobody really knew that. Anyway, I don't want to get into the whole history of William Moulton Marston, but it is a fascinating history to say the least. Not to say he's like the greatest man to ever walk the earth, not even close. He wouldn't even say that. He would say quite the opposite, actually. He would say there is no such thing as a great man, only great women. But there we go. Anyway, he would release The Private Life of Julius Caesar, and in the 50s, and he would subtitle it Venus With Us, so you knew it was the same book, even though it had been altered to some degree. And as far as I understand it, The Private Life of Julius Caesar is a sexed up, like an even sexier version, even though Venus With Us in the 30s was as sexed up as could be as well, Okay, it's an even, more erotic version and more extreme version of the book. So it's the one to have. The thing is that as far as I understand it, and look, even go ahead and hop on Google if you want to pick the great search engine, right? Even if you want to look there, it's very difficult to find information on these books. Very, very difficult. Because they're that rare. And in fact, if you start looking for them, you're going to find anybody that might happen to sell it, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to look at the price tag on that fucking thing. You're going to be, holy shit, they want $1,000 for this book? Yeah. Or who knows how much. I got lucky because I sure as hell didn't pay $1,000. Okay, I got very lucky to acquire a copy of The Private Life of Julius Caesar, but double lucky because that book was only released in paperback. And so it's actually very hard to find a preserved copy of this book. So I had it professionally scanned, of course, along with many other books, but I had it professionally scanned and preserved now electronically. It's OCR scanned, so you can search it, the whole thing. Even though the version I think that I put out is a much smaller version, it's because otherwise it's in the hundreds of megabytes. Okay, I have a whole hard drive where I have a RAID set up where all this stuff gets saved because I'll never let anything happen to it. These things are too precious to me. But I totally recommend checking it out, and I know quite a few of you already have. Like I said, I have thousands of followers on Twitter, and I have the statistics to see how many people downloaded it. Okay, and the hits just keep on coming. Like that number keeps skyrocketing up and up and up. And I'm glad that you enjoy it. Only got one person hurting this situation, but I'm glad that everybody's enjoying it. Clearly, these books need to be preserved. Books need to be preserved, as Ellen would often say, and she would. And I loved, I don't mean to boast, but she would often look at me so glowingly, over it because she thought it was, every time I talk about it and do it, she just thinks it's just one of the most heroic things for anyone to do. And I love her for that. But it is, she's right. For anyone, not just me, anybody doing it, it is a heroic act to save these works. And not only that, there's more heroism to go as far as books are concerned. I've been recently reading, and this just came out last year, and this is out of a multi-decade effort. And as far as publishing goes, this has been getting published in parts for over 20 years. And that is the Hebrew Bible, even though I bristle at that term, because the Hebrew Bible is like saying, well, something I say often. If you say 10 a.m. in the morning, it's like, okay, you said 10 a.m. Do you need to say, you don't have to say in the morning. Right. It's an and it's not an oxymoron, but it's like, it's redundant to say that. It's pointless to say 10 a.m. in the morning. I think it's pointless to say Hebrew Bible. It's the fucking Bible. Of course it's Hebrew. Now, if you want to say, well, what about the New Testament? This is so we know that you're talking about the Old Testament. Oh, yeah, right. Because, everybody thinks that the New Testament's the Bible, or part of it. Anyway. So I bristle at the term Hebrew Bible. When you say Bible, it should mean Torah and, more or less Torah alone. You want to talk about the New Testament? Then you can call it that. Because that's your bag. And that's fine, but that's your bag. Okay? Anyway, so Robert Alter who's a Hebrew scholar out of Berkeley, very famous, very well respected. He has been, over the past 20 years, been publishing different sections of the Bible, Torah. For those who don't, Old Testament, fine, I'll give you that one just once. And he's been doing tremendous work, and he raises. So he finally, where this is all going is, I started reading the other morning. I woke up and I started reading the Bible. Now I imagine there's thousands of people who probably are saying hallelujah. I mean, thousands of people aren't hearing this content behind a paywall, this Zomia ONE Underground Q&A. But I can imagine so many people are like, hallelujah, he's reading the Bible, he is saved. Whoa. I read these things for very different reasons, folks. But anyway, so Robert Alter finally came out with the full version of Torah with all of his, the past 20 years at least of translation work, tremendous translation work. And he finally put it out there actually last year in 2018. I finally got around to starting to read it. And man, it is, as a Jew myself, let me tell you, Jews love footnotes. We love footnotes, not just in, Torah or Talmud or, in like religious texts. We like footnotes in fucking everything. And boy, do I. I certainly inherited that. And the footnotes alone in this are worth whatever it costs for you, or if it doesn't cost you anything, it doesn't cost you anything. But whatever it takes for you to get your hands on this, the footnotes alone are absolutely priceless. They are priceless. But he raises some great points. I mean, I could start since I mentioned the footnotes, let me start with some of the footnotes. Let's just start with, the most interesting book to ever read a translation of, or a new translation of, is, in Torah it'd be called Bereshit. For everybody else, it's known as the Book of Genesis, right? And the Book of Genesis is just such a wild, contradictory, fascinating little piece of literary work that, again, a lot of scholars think it actually has multiple writers. It's not just one, it wasn't just Moses that wrote it down, whatever. Okay. It is such it's always a fascinating read in any new translation to see what people, frankly, what biases show up, and understand that Robert Alter was really trying to stick. And everybody says this, right? Like if you read the New American Standard Version of the Bible and so on, they always talk about how, we went with a very literal translation. We just tried to make it readable and blah, blah, blah. Everybody says that's what they go for. Or maybe there's versions, what was that popular one? There was The Message, or even there was like that newer version, was it Today's New International Version, all this other stuff, where they talk about being, they want to capture the spirit of the stories being told. In my opinion, as a doctorate of divinity, thank you. In my opinion, those versions where they are trying to capture the spirit of what's being said and not the literalness, is taking the Bible at face value, when taking the Bible at face value is only one way of understanding the text, and arguably not even the most important. Actually, I don't think it's the most important. And in fact, and I've talked about this, we've had recent conversations because listeners have asked me, I don't just talk about this shit. I'd be worried about anybody that does just talk about this stuff, unprompted. In Kabbalah, you have rabbis from, 1,000 years ago or more, who basically say that if the order in which the words appear in Torah, and of course this is referencing the original Hebrew, obviously, but in the order in which these words appear, if you reordered them, he's not saying that Torah is like in the wrong order necessarily, but that's kind of what's being said. And basically they suggest that if you reordered them, you would be able to perform miracles. Like if you knew the actual way you were supposed to read Torah, miraculous things could be done. You could literally create planets. That's exactly what they say. And how did they know that there's even like worlds? Well, that gets into another conversation entirely, but it's nonetheless fascinating that they know that, or that they knew that over 1,000 years ago. So anyway, I don't think that, like, even if that were true, even if I believed that kind of thing was possible, certainly translating shit into the spirit of things is a complete fuck up. Because you're not even giving anyone the chance of, processing and harnessing the true power of Torah, right? So it's a fuck up. It absolutely, that's not how you should ever translate the Bible. Of course, should you ever translate it? Well, that's a great question too. And Robert Alter actually brings up that point as well. But regardless of all that, okay, got lost in the weeds a little bit there. So the footnotes for the book of Genesis are absolutely fascinating from Robert Alter. And I am just scratching the surface here of the brilliance that gets put on display. One of the most amazing statements that he brings up, okay? And he brings up, right in the introduction, of course, he talks about how our understanding of ancient Hebrew has been greatly enhanced over the past few decades, far different than, what was even known by Jews themselves for, frankly, centuries. And he brings up that in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, again, those two specifically, and maybe chapter 6 and some of, the chapters about Noah are probably the most interesting. Okay. I mean, there's more like the story of Abraham. That's interesting too. But I think chapter 1 and chapter 2, which I did an entire user podcast basically about, I think are just some of the most interesting literature in human history. And in that he talks about how the word Adam or, Adam it is not, for a good chunk of its use in the book of Genesis, it is not referencing a person. It is referencing, and not only that, okay, so it's referencing humanity, but here's the rub. It's referencing humanity. It's not even referencing man as in maleness. There is nothing in the text to suggest that the use of the word Adam or Adam is referencing a male. Nothing. It's not there. In fact, if you did make it a male, there are points in the text where it is contradicting the context. If you assume that it's referencing maleness. And I thought, I'm reading this footnote and I'm going, holy shit, like that. I mean, that is dynamite to consider. And it kind of reminded me, even though this movie is, well, I think this movie does have some very interesting occult concepts purposely used and put into it. But the movie Noah with Russell Crowe. I love that movie. When you see, when you see Adam, what appears to be Adam and Eve in it, they look like these just genderless beings of light, right? And so one could argue that's actually because, a lot of people flipped out about that movie Noah because they said, oh, well, this isn't the Bible. This is an abomination that they did here. They took too much creative license. Well, actually, maybe that movie was a little more on the nose with certain things. But anyway, I digress on that. But I thought that was absolutely fascinating. The idea that the use of Adam. Now, I mean, I'd kind of known this, that the use of Adam is is interchangeable with referring to mankind or, humanity and referencing a person. And there's certainly points where it is referencing an individual of some kind. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was his name. I mean, oh man, again, the footnotes are the real beauty of the text. And he knocks it out of the park right there. The other weird part in this, just in the first couple chapters, is instead of the word firmament, okay, when God is creating the earth, instead of the word firmament, Robert Alter basically says he's really what it's really referencing. The term being used here is a reference to a slab. Okay. And so he uses a vault. Basically, it says God put a vault between the waters, right? When there is, nothingness, and he creates the waters and then he puts the firmament and blah, blah, blah. That's how most people or most translations kind of read it or put it out. And he uses the word vault. And I don't know exactly where to go with that. But he says, really, it's like a slab. He says, but the word vault somehow fits. And I mean, it makes you, when you use the word vault and when you consider that, it does open one up to the concept that the earth is something, it's protecting something. Like using the word vault is something that protects, right? Or holds. And boy, I could go wild to speculation, but I'm still thinking about all this. And I thought that was just wild wild what Robert Alter was putting out there. And I'm definitely interested. The next book I want to get, after I read Genesis, I want to read that through. I want to skip to the book of Ezekiel, and I'm curious if Robert Alter has anything really to say that might have some suggestions with like the work of Joseph Blumrich, right? With like Spaceships of Ezekiel. Again, and I did a full review of Spaceships of Ezekiel. If you are new to Zomia ONE Underground content, or if you're new to Sovereign Tech, you've never heard me talk about aliens. I don't believe aliens have ever visited the Earth, okay? Or like that some extraterrestrials have come. I don't believe it. All right. I have different, I don't want to say interpretations, but, I think the evidence suggests otherwise. But so, yeah, don't think I'm going to go all aliens on you. All right. And fortunately, Robert Alter's work has never been used in Ancient Aliens, because I would hate for such brilliant scholarship to be sullied by such nonsense. That being Ancient Aliens being the nonsense. Yeah, I was blown away. I really recommend picking this up and giving it a good read, because it does read very fresh, very different, and a lot of parts make a lot more sense. In fact, Robert Alter brings up a great point just in the introduction, talking about the way that he translates things. And that is basically, we are dealing with largely the Masoretic text, which obviously isn't an autograph. We can get into the stories around the possibilities if there were even autographs of, the original ancient Hebrew works in Aramaic and everything. But, we're working off of the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text was something created by, or originally was done by rabbis much later than any of the events we're talking about. Okay. In fact, the Masoretic text would even come after a lot of the texts of the New Testament and everything. So that said, the point that he brings up is that when rabbis were putting together the Masoretic text, they would have used phrasing that directly, when they're putting down the written Torah. Okay. Now you have to understand this, that there's an oral Torah and a written Torah, right? Okay. Moses was given two things. He was given the written Torah, which is what got passed down, and you have the, in book form of any kind or scroll form, and that you can read today, as the Bible. And then you have the oral Torah, which is what God told him and gave him some, gave him understanding and context to what was in the Bible itself, in the written Torah. Now the oral Torah would get passed down, but, by the priestly class, one priest to another, for however many centuries or thousands of years. Eventually, you would have rabbis who would, in fear of losing the oral Torah, because, right, they watched their temples burn. They were just terrified that they would lose it. They finally wrote down the oral Torah, right? And this is what's known as the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah, I had never really read. I've kind of read and had some understanding, because you learn some basic Hebrew, even ancient Hebrew, growing up when you're brought up Jewish, and you're told what some sayings mean or kind of translate to in English, of course. But I never really read the whole thing, and there wasn't an English version, an English translation of the Mishnah until Jacob Neusner did it. What was that, 2009? Not that long ago. And that's when I finally read it, and, in its entirety, and it's still in and of itself is a massive tome. It's a tome, though, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why? Because this is how I describe the Mishnah, the oral Torah. Okay. But it has, all right, before I describe the Mishnah, let me, so it has a lot of sayings in it, a lot of phrasings. Robert Alter's point is that the rabbis that created the Masoretic text would have written things, transcribed things, did their own, would effectively have done a bit of their own translation, that, or even if they were just passing it down, they would know that there would be references to the oral Torah. There would be phrases from the oral Torah that make sense in the oral Torah. Kind of make sense in the oral Torah, that are referencing a concept and point in the oral Torah that would end up getting used in the written Torah. Okay. And so if you don't know, though, if you don't have knowledge of the Oral Torah, if you don't have knowledge of the Mishnah, you will just translate, the written Torah to mean something completely different without any knowledge of the Oral Torah. And Robert Alter's point is that a lot of scholars, and I think he would say especially Christian ones, would fuck it up because they would not understand that a certain thing in the Masoretic text was referencing the Mishnah, and in the Mishnah, it had a certain meaning to it. Okay. I mean, it had a context that isn't changing the literalness. It's not spirit. It's not the spirit of what's being said. It's not changing the literalness. It is adding context to the literalness. And that needs to be there. Or not just that it needs to be there, but sometimes, like there's points where the word seed would be used in the Bible, right? And Christian translators would think that it was referencing offspring, but maybe there's points where it really needed to talk about semen and semen alone. And you only knew that because of what the Mishnah was bringing up. So the translation didn't change. It's just you had more context as to where, and you had more context that came from another authority, that came from textual authority, right? As to where the Christians are just, or, the translators are just like, okay, well, that must be offspring. And so they added in there for more readability. Not really for more context, which runs into a very big problem. So Robert Alter's translation, I think, for that alone is very important. I mean, because you have to, and it's tough because the Mishnah is an untamed beast. The Mishnah, and the way that because I was talking to Ellen about this the other night, and the way that I described the Mishnah to her was that it's the Mishnah, the Oral Torah, is, this is the best analogy I could come up with, is that the written Torah is the internet and the Oral Torah is basically Google. Okay. But it's like trying to, so the Mishnah helps you search and bring context and truth and understanding, right, to the written Torah. But consider that basically the Mishnah is, because if you just read it straight, it doesn't make a whole ton of sense. When I did it, years ago, it didn't make a whole ton of sense to me. Okay. And that's because it's basically like trying to take Google and put it in book form. Imagine trying to do that. You can't do that. How do you turn a search engine into a book? But that's really what I think the Mishnah basically is, what the Oral Torah is it's really a search engine in a very real sense for the written Torah, but it's trying, but that's why it was oral, because you can't put it into a book. You can put the words into the book, but that doesn't really have understanding until you attach it, right, to written Torah. But if you don't attach it to written Torah, you don't understand written Torah. See, it's a pain in the ass, but Robert Alter tried to pull it off. And I got to give him credit. And the footnotes, again, are just totally, totally priceless in it. It's been a brilliant read so far. I totally recommend. Look, I'm an atheist. If you're an atheist too, I totally recommend reading it because it adds in. There's just so much more understanding, and really, especially if you're an atheist that likes to get to the bottom of things, I think you're going to find a lot more of the reality around what's being said in the Bible that even people who claim to know it and read it all the time don't know. And don't understand. And well, anyway, I don't know. I get a kick out of it. But then also I think that there are a lot of historical and perhaps scientific truths within the Bible itself. Again, I'm an atheist. Don't misunderstand me at all. But I think that they are there. Something is there. Okay, to glean from that. And I've really enjoyed Robert Alter's work. So now I've been talking about that for 30 minutes. But I imagine you'll find it fascinating because I get asked these kind of questions all the time. How about we get into our actual fucking questions? Let's do this. All right, we got a tech question here. Let's get right on it. Let's make this happen. Okay, and this is actually from Jim Jesus of the Lulberts podcast, who I always appreciate his support and his work. And here we go. Of course, he told me I can mention him, so I am. Otherwise, I like to keep people anonymous unless you really want me to, tell people who you are. So here we go. I keep hearing, this is the question. I keep hearing that I shouldn't use TOR network because the government created it or that there are government nodes. But I don't think this is an issue with best practices and in tandem with a good VPN. You talk about using tails and TOR. I think he meant how wrong are they? How wrong are they then, and why? Also, meaning the people who say you shouldn't use TOR. Also, you know the drill. You can out me for the question. Hail Satan. Hail Satan. Absolutely, Jim. So anyway, yeah. Oh, also, he at the end he put P.S. Fuck Terminator movies after 3. Fight me. Okay, before we get into TOR, let's have fun with that Terminator comment. So I have not seen Dark Fate yet. Is that right? That's what it is. I have not seen Dark Fate yet. I am going to go see it. Okay. Rise of the Machines, I liked. It is a movie that I have barely ever watched again. The main thing that I really liked out of Rise of the Machines with Terminator was when they did the Arnold cameo. Okay. Genesis, I did like Genesis quite a bit. But I gotta say, like, by comparison, and I've heard the mixed reviews for Dark Fate, and I think Dark Fate has basically fallen into, is what I understand of Dark Fate, it has basically fallen into all of the trappings that the rest of the entertainment industry, which we've talked about over and over again on Q&As especially, have fallen into, okay, where it's, trying to hit the nostalgic beats and then play it safe to get as many asses in seats as possible. But apparently it even failed at that. I'm just going to say that overall, Jim, I agree with you. Overall, I have been a staunch defender of Terminator 3 for a long time. I think that's a fine and dandy movie. And I think it's a ballsy movie. You know why? Because the ending is not good. The good guys do not win. Spoiler alert, it's only been out for 20 years, but I can't even imagine a movie today having the sack to end with civilization being destroyed and just ending that way, like Terminator 3 did. And it did that. Yeah, it's like The Empire Strikes Back. I've always given Empire Strikes Back so much credit for ending with the bad guys winning. Terminator 3 is another one of those movies, and it's gorgeous and wonderful for that. And I think I didn't like John Connor in it. That's kind of my number one complaint, even though I can appreciate that John Connor is just kind of a more like normal looking guy, and he's not like the more heroic looking guy in Terminator 2. I can appreciate that, well, like what that says is that, like anybody could be the hero, blah, blah, blah. Like I can kind of appreciate that. And we still had, Arnold. I thought that Kate, or what's her name? My so-called life there, her, she played Kate. Her character's name was Kate, I think, in the movie. She was fantastic in that. Catherine Brewster, right? That was her name. I thought the Terminatrix, I thought that was a great idea. There are whole novels. Timothy Zahn did the Salvation novels. Who was it? S.M. Stirling? Maybe it was S.M. Stirling that did sequel novels and a prequel novel to Terminator 3. And it was great. It was really, really great. The Salvation, Timothy Zahn also did novels around Salvation, and there were comic books done around Terminator Salvation that really flesh out that story, and the movie becomes a bit more enjoyable with that. But you really need all of that, and you need to appreciate Timothy Zahn's work, which can sometimes be slow and plotting. But I like his style, like a lot of people didn't like the Conquerors trilogy that Timothy Zahn did. I think those books are brilliant. I am such a big fan of those books. I don't think they're boring at all. Give me boring any day of the week. Seriously, folks, let's call this and let's choose this. I would rather have a boring fucking movie. Here's a movie that a lot of people think is boring. Well, how about Star Trek the Motion Picture? How about the Andromeda Strain? Go down the list. I would take those any day of the week over the popcorn horse shit that we're getting now in theaters. Maybe even like Terminator Dark Fate. I'm going to go see it. I think Jim even tweeted at me and said I wouldn't like it. And I'm open to that I won't. But, it's going to be great to see Arnold and Linda Hamilton. I don't think anybody complains about that. But Regardless, I'll take boring any day of the week, you know, and I'm a big Timothy Zahn fan. Anyway, now I don't expect Terminator is one of those franchises, okay, where I don't expect, it was never laid out, it's never been part of the program for you to go and read all the comics, play the games, and there are great games for Terminator, you know, or all the novels or whatever to understand a Terminator movie. That's not what Terminator's about, right? Terminator has a very salient, always salient point. It is, they are slasher films with a morality play. And that's what makes them so damn good. Or that's what makes the real ones so damn good. And I would say the real ones are probably the original trilogy, right? Which should be considered the original trilogy. Terminator 1, Terminator 2, and Terminator 3. Now, I mean, there were also, actually, maybe it was S.M. Stirling that wrote those. God damn it. Anyway, I think it was S.M. Stirling that wrote, there were sequel books to Terminator 2 before Terminator 3 was, you know, a gleam in anyone's eye. And well, I think one of them was like Dark War even or something like that. Anyway, they were great. I remember really, really enjoying those. I know I have all of these in ebook form. Infiltrator, I think, was one of them. Anyway, yeah, those were great books. So, I mean, you know, there's lots of extraneous Terminator stuff that's really, really solid in different mediums that you can go and appreciate and that have done a better job, I would argue, even than Terminator 3. And I mean, I kind of wish that Terminator actually would, like, people would want to engage the Terminator universe in these other mediums more. I really do, because I think some of its best work in the Terminator franchise and saga have been done outside of the movies, you know? But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm not going to argue that. If you want, I mean, I am shy of saying, you know, fuck the Terminator movies except for 1, 2, and 3. And I appreciate that it sounds like you enjoyed 3 as well. I mean, I liked 3 a lot. I think that movie had so much balls, you know, to you know, the grapefruits to end with the bad guy, with Skynet winning was, you know, I mean, and it's a massacre, you know, nobody survives. Minus, you know, John Connor and Catherine Brewster. Nobody survives. So well done. And almost sexy. I really love that. And Arnold was, at the time, I mean, when he made Terminator 3, what did they give him? $30 million? I mean, he was the highest paid actor in Hollywood at that time. That was an unheard of amount of money for an actor to get paid for. And amazingly, at his age, he was just shy, I want to say, of 60 then. And he pretty much looked as good as he did in Terminator 2. And this is before you had CGI overlays that actors would put on themselves. Like, you know, that's something we've talked about as well on Sovereign Tech proper many times, and that we brought up many times, is that, you know, anything you see on, even if you think you are seeing the most stupid little independent film with, I don't know, whatever, some showpiece with some, you know, maybe you have a couple big names on there, Gene Hackman or Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, both of them are great, obviously, as far as actors go. But understand this. Every movie you see today pretty much has CGI in it. Every single one. In fact, almost nothing is real. Actors pay crazy amounts of money. Not even just for and here's why I feel comfortable. We're going to get into the TOR question, don't worry. Here's why I feel comfortable saying that this is done in every film. Because they do this in their home movies as well. They hire companies to put CGI, computer-generated overlays on themselves. Even, you know, they're not playing some alien, they're not playing a Terminator, they're not playing any weird part. Just them as a human being. But to hide their wrinkles, to make them look like they haven't aged, or, I mean, and we're not talking about like that dumbass Will Smith movie or, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, you know, looking young again in Captain Marvel. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just to make them not look old. A very, very light, simple CGI retouching of again, it plasters an entire film. There is no film you are going to watch today. And I think unconsciously, people realize this. And I could get into some very conspiratorial realms, okay, as to what this is all really about. And this has to do with like 4K and 8K as well. But whatever's on the screen, none of that is even remotely real. There was a time where it was, and I think that those movies impacted us more for that very reason. Even when we were watching, Christopher Reeve and Superman, right? Even when we were seeing that, because the bulk of it was still very visceral and very real. It was what do they call practical effects, right? Because it's that, you feel it more unconsciously because you pick up on it. Even if you don't consciously pick up on it, your brain still sees it. And I think that's why it's part of the reason that a lot of movies now, like recent Star Wars films and whatever else, are, banking so hard and pushing so hard to say, oh yeah, these are practical effects. I think because they might know that Hollywood probably knows that this is an unconscious effect happening. And so to be able to get certain crowds and to please them, there's got to be some practical effects, or they're trying to kind of half and half it. Okay. To have the unreality of CGI, but then to still have the reality. I'm not making some kind of, broad claim against CGI. I don't mind CGI. My favorite television show ever used a metric butt ton of CGI, that being Babylon 5, and it's CGI that didn't even look good. Okay. But then that doesn't get into the more conspiratorial realms that I would get into with 4K and a lot of this, CGI overlay and everything. Yeah, I know you're going to ask me. what the fuck, what are the conspiratorial realms that I would go with? Okay, I'll hit it quick. Very quick, and I'm not going to expound on it. You can ask me about it and I'll expound upon it more. I feel like, and part of this realization has only come to me recently, and part of it has to do with the fact that, like John Carmack, like we talked about in the last Sovereign Tech, John Carmack has left Oculus. I feel like I am open to the idea. I shouldn't say that I feel this way, that I know this for certain, because I don't. I am open to the idea that Hollywood, the entertainment industry, even the news industry, the media, multimedia, all media, is conditioning people to accept things that look completely unreal, okay, or that look superficially real, okay, because again, like I just said, I think people can unconsciously recognize when it's not, and it kind of unsettles them a little bit, even though they don't understand the feeling. But conditioning people to accept the superficially real, again, it's not really real, it's superficially real, the superficially real, so that they have no grasp of actual reality. Because if you have no grasp of reality, I mean, you'll fall for anything and you'll buy into whatever narrative. I mean, it just, yeah, I'm open to that idea. I am not saying that that's what's going on. I'm not saying that I absolutely believe that. I'm not saying anything like that. Keep your pitchforks over there. Save them for someone else who's actually making like crazy claims. Okay? I'm just saying it's an idea. And I wonder about it sometimes. Okay? Believe me, you can, a good look at the patent office. Technologies that do a lot of the things that I just described have been in the patent office since the 60s. Since as long as movies have been around. Okay? And whatever, motion pictures or TV or whatever. I mean, if you... a good skimming, and you could spend 20 lifetimes doing it, but a good skim through the patent office, and you would be amazed at the shit that is at the very least been conceptualized. Whether or not it's ever actually been developed is another story. And there are books that kind of cover this stuff, that try to compile these more interesting ideas, especially as they reference the transmission of media. And some of it's pretty fucking creepy. But anyway, there absolutely are. This is not conspiracy or up to debate. There absolutely are companies who put their whole mission is not to create X-Wings, CGI X-Wings or CGI starships or anything like that, or dinosaurs. Their entire CGI mission is to make actors look kind of like they do right now, even if they're in their 60s or 70s, but then make them look pretty damn good for being in their 70s. It's a light touch. And again, this is not just for Hollywood budgets. They do this to home videos for birthday parties. If you think anybody is vain, I mean, and just to show how out of touch with reality these fucking Hollywood stars are. Holy hell. Crazy. So anything you see on a screen, computer screen, whatever, I mean, none of it is reality. You might as well question all of it. If you only, only trust what you see with your eyes, and, in the future, maybe even then we might want to, what's in front of your eyes, literally right there, meat space. Okay. But even then we got to be careful. Okay. So after that little tirade, let's talk about TOR while we talk about trusting things. Hopefully, we might not get into that BDSM question this week because I can't let this go over an hour. I might have to push that also back to next week, but I think we had some interesting things to discuss here anyway. So, all right, I'm going to reread the question quick because we went on a tirade, but yes, Terminator 1, 2, and 3, fucking dynamite. Okay, here we go. I keep hearing that I shouldn't use Tor network because the government created it or that there are government nodes. Okay, let's address that part of the question first. Did the government create Tor? Yes, it was funded by the U.S. Navy. That's absolutely true. Are there government nodes? Yes, absolutely. No question about that. That's both of those statements are true. Let's continue. But I don't think, this is the question, but I don't think this is an issue with best practices, meaning that if you use it and you engage in best practices, right, anonymizing yourself, as I've often said, pretend you're, when you go on TOR, you are not whoever you are. When I go on TOR, I am not Brian Sovereign. Okay, I mean, well, when I go on TOR to do TOR things, I am not Brian Sovereign. If you want to pretend you're the Green Ranger or the Red Ranger or I don't know, whatever, just you have to create an alternative identity. You want to be absolutely anonymous. Okay, that's why I've recommended have a separate device. I mean, in whatever, a tablet, whatever, have a separate device, or a cheap laptop that's what you use TOR on. And whenever you are at that device, you are a different person. You are a different identity. Okay? That's best practices, or at least that's part of it. And there's more. And in tandem with a good VPN. Yeah, not a terrible idea. Okay, you talk about using tails in TOR. How wrong are they then and why? So how wrong are the people that are saying you shouldn't use TOR? Okay, they are wrong. And they probably told you. I mean, let's just call it here. Okay, they probably told you that they probably told you over the internet, right? Which, does the internet have government nodes? Yeah, basically they more or less all are. Okay, I mean, you could say about Verizon's fiber, oh, that's private, and yeah, okay, like any telco is actually not part of the government, but whatever. Okay. The internet was also originally funded and was originally a government technology. The internet was, and I know there's free marketeers, whatever they want to call themselves, who say, oh no, the internet was a free market innovation. No. Okay, the market might have figured out how to make money off of the internet, but the internet came out of ARPANET. The internet's purpose originally was to be a communications network that could survive Skynet. Well, no, it creates it. No, that could survive a nuclear holocaust or a nuclear disaster. Okay. That was what the internet was designed for. It was not designed for, you to get email. Okay. Then it ended up in colleges and the more practical technologies around it, and colleges are state institutions. They are the state. They are not the market. They started, developing interesting things that you could do on top of this. But keep in mind that, colleges originally were developing a lot of this stuff with the military, right? Stanford Research, okay, which is totally, say what you want, it's a military think tank. Or it's part of that whole, it's part of the military industrial complex, okay? They had the mother of all demos, right? Everything from all the ideas. Like, people want to say, oh, Skype is a market idea. Oh, no, they had all of these ideas in the 60s, right down to the mouse. Xerox didn't invent shit. Everybody's like, well, Apple and Microsoft didn't invent it. No, Xerox did. No. SRI developed everything. Everything we're doing today, they came up with in the 60s. And you can watch the demo. It's called the mother of all demos. And you can see them do it. Hypertext, all of it. They came up with all of it decades ago. And it was all for the government. Get over yourself. Okay, if you think that it's the market that made it. Look, if fucking Snapchat is a product of the market, fuck the fucking market. Because that is one of the worst goddamn things that's ever come across the human eye. Destroying our... Anyway. So they basically, the reasons, what I'm going to get, I'll make this short. I'll make this shorter. What the reasons that people give you to not use Tor. The same exact, all those same claims could be made about the internet. So why the fuck, if you're not willing to use Tor, why would you use the internet? Like if the argument is don't use Tor because government knows government funding, don't touch the internet. Or Tor is a government invention. Don't touch the internet. And I'm not even saying that that's a bad piece of advice either. But let's be clear here. Now, okay, so to understand though, why should you still use Tor in that case? Okay, so they are wrong, like you said, Jim. They are absolutely wrong. And they need to get, if they don't believe in using Tor, they need to get off the internet entirely. Okay. Tor was developed absolutely for, here's the purpose of Tor. Tor was developed to create secure communications, probably initially by the Navy, but then it got further development and continued to get funded. And understand, up until 2015, Tor was still some odd 85, almost just shy of 100% funded by the government. Up until 2015, it's just a few years ago. It's only now that it's about at the point where half of the funding for Tor development is private. That's only been in literally the past year. Okay. And I think it's interesting that also, never mind. I'm not going there. Okay. So Tor would continue development when my opinion, and not just my opinion, I think there's evidence to back it up. The CIA found it useful to engage in foreign operations with activists in enemy territory. And I don't mean like American activists. I mean activists that could, unseat regimes in whatever country the CIA wanted to fuck with. Okay. Now, here's the rub. Okay. And that is that tool, okay, you'd say, okay, well, if that's what it's for, why did the CIA make it available for everybody? They made it, the Tor developers, I think even when they knew that that's what it ended up being used for, basically made, or at least the people, the conceivers of Tor probably gave them the logic of, because we do know that Tor, I mean, there's some evidence to say that Tor developers told the Navy, this has to be available to everybody. And that's because if it's not available to everybody, it would be too easy to find the signal in the noise. Meaning you would know when the CIA was communicating with somebody because Tor is such recognizable, traffic. Okay. So you'd see that signal. So the idea is that you have to make this available to everybody. Okay. That way, the signal to noise ratio, stays to where nobody knows what's going on. So the point being is that Tor works. Now, I mean, has Tor been cracked? Is there's, some 0 days potentially? I mean, because, there's people who said that, the government by the Tor project's own charter, what amounts to a charter, that the government has basically first claim, okay, to any 0 days that are found or any bugs that are found in Tor. That is true. Okay. But then also they lay claim to any and all of that and pay very handsomely for the broader internet. Okay. So it's not anything different. Tor does not operate, conceptually different than, or abstractly different than any other, interconnected medium. All right. So again, all these arguments are basically arguments to never use any interconnected medium. All right. Now, the idea is, besides finding 0 days and shit like that, which is in everything, even, frankly, even Signal has RAM links, or RAM leaks. Okay. Even, you could say Telegram doesn't have a problem. Okay, whatever. But, with Tor, okay, it works. And it works really, really well. And the CIA and whatever other alphabet soup organization wants it to continue to work really, really well. Why? Because ultimately it allows them to achieve their goals, even if it means that activists that aren't on the CIA payroll or who aren't duped by the CIA get to use it. Okay? So you can Tor, again, this is the same thing with Bitcoin, actually. Why do I have the confidence? Me, Brian Sovereign, my opinion here, and I'm not the only one that holds this opinion. Why do I have the confidence that Bitcoin's never going to go to zero or fail? Because Bitcoin, who loves to use Bitcoin? It's so ironic because everybody thinks the government's against Bitcoin. No, the government's against the people. Okay, but they're not against Bitcoin. The CIA loves Bitcoin. The FBI loves Bitcoin. Untraceable money? Woo! Or harder to trace, I guess I should say. Harder to trace money? Oh, man. That's a wet dream for those guys. Does that mean that because the government is probably the biggest mover and shaker in Bitcoin, does that mean we shouldn't use Bitcoin? The fuck no. Of course we should use Bitcoin. We should use it for the same reason they use it, because, it fucks with authority. And Tor fucks with authority. And we know that too, also from, slides that were revealed from the Snowden documents. Tor work, especially like you said, Jim, with best practices, Tor does work. You want to be really, really careful. And there's a lot, best practices, you want to follow them hard. Okay. It's sure as fuck better than just using, the clear internet. It is sure as fuck better than just using the clear internet. And again, I think any argument against Tor equally holds against the internet. So, you might as well just not use any of it if you're going to make those kinds of arguments. Okay. But yeah, the reason to use Tor, it's so funny, they're like, oh, well, but there's government knows. Yeah, because it works. And it gives the American empire, a foothold in other places. Okay. But then also because it does work, that's a good reason for you to use it. And why do they allow for the everyday person to use it? How could they possibly allow that? Again, it's all about that signal to noise ratio. Okay. It's just like, I'm going to give an example. Okay. The military with psychological operations. Okay. One of the easiest things to set up, and I don't mean psyops. It's a psyop. No, shut up. Anybody who says that kind of crap, especially when they have no history in the matter, can go shit themselves. Okay. Psychological operations. When you are going to, which, Tor would be partly useful for psychological operations as well. Understand psychological operations is basically a propaganda machine. Okay. You are a propaganda machine if you're working in that. When you go, okay, to another country and you want, let's say Kuwait. Okay. Let's say it's the early 90s and you're going to Kuwait. You go into Kuwait. All right. Now you want to try and soften up a volatile situation, a volatile foreign situation. If you are let's say you're the U.S. Army, you want to soften up a volatile situation, the other side or the indigenous people. You want to soften them up as much as you can before, a single battalion lands, okay, drops foot in that country. For example, Kuwait. Now, how do you do that? Well, if it was the 90s, you drop off pamphlets, right, that say, hey, actually Saddam's a bad guy, blah, 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 you go down this. Or you create alternative television shows, which is pretty hard to actually do. With the internet, it's a bit of a different story, but then, the internet can kind of get shut down. Like one of still to this day, one of the most popular things is setting up radio. But at the time, in the 90s, certainly this would be the first thing that you would do, is that you would set up a pirate radio station. Very easy, very inexpensive, very quick, very simple to set up and make happen. And you would hire locals to, to speak, and you'd give them scripts, and you'd say, okay, say this, and we'll give you food, or we'll give you money, whatever. Okay. And, again, the U.S. military is operating all this. Okay. But here's the thing, okay, is that you don't just set up one pirate radio station. You set up 20. Why? Because that way there's so many different places for the opposition to have to go after. But two, you have, there isn't, again, it really does come down to there's not one place to look at. Okay. It is creating a signal to noise ratio that allows for some, defense through decentralization, effectively. And so you never just set up one pirate radio station. Again, you set up 20, and you have them going everywhere and crossing beams. Crossing waves. It's that tight. And Tor works under the same auspices. Basically, that if only the CIA, again, operated Tor, or if only whatever alphabet soup organization only operated Tor, the enemy in whatever other country would instantly know where that traffic was coming from and would be able to analyze that traffic quickly. However, if you make it something that actually works, just like pirate radio works, okay, and can't be stopped, if you make it something that everybody uses, okay, that everybody takes advantage of, then the signal to noise ratio, you can't tell what's government operations, what's just some simple activists out of New Hampshire, sharing podcasts, you don't know. And that's the point. It's obfuscation. Okay, it's a classic move. Well, yeah, it's just a classic move in all of this. You do it with every technology, not just technologies based on the internet or TCP/IP. So yeah, in my opinion, yeah, I mean, is it possible that the government, is able to, the U.S. government? Is it possible that they are able to de-anonymize some of that Tor traffic? Yeah, I think we've seen that it's possible. I don't think we've ever actually seen it done. Okay, and that's something that these Tor detractors really need to speak up about. Is that, they got to find, if we found the case where it happened, I mean, and maybe it has happened and the government's kept it so quiet. I mean, some people want to point at Silk Road, hey. Maybe it has happened and they don't want, people to know about it. But regardless, even if that's the case, then they seem to be very rare cases. And for the bulk of people who are probably, some people are doing, I imagine, some pretty dastardly shit. And some people are doing very above board. And, nobody would ever have a goddamn problem with it stuff on Tor. And we want everybody using Tor. It's pretty clear that the government only cracks down on stuff when it has a point it wants to make. It is not, the government really doesn't seem to care about laws much. Not really. Okay. They have the laws set up so that when something or someone becomes a bit of a problem, they can shut it down. But if it's not something that's in any way interfering, or if they don't have to make some kind of a statement, okay, against an industry, like is probably what happened with Silk Road, then they don't worry about it, and illegal, quote unquote, illegal shit is happening all the time. And the government never does anything about it. So even if they could. So even if there were those kinds of things, I mean, yeah, again, engage in best practices. And yeah, just be careful out there. I mean, the best, and I hate it because it's such a stressful attitude to have. But how you need to learn to think is that anytime something effectively leaves your brain today, okay, we live in such a crazy surveillance society, right? Anytime something leaves your brain, even when you speak it, there's a very good chance that it got recorded somehow. Either your voice got recorded, or even if you wrote it down, that there was, I don't know, a mosquito drone. No, that there's a camera somewhere. I mean, it's just, it's very possible. So you just have to, gauge your tolerance for all this stuff. But I think it still makes sense to engage in best practices. And frankly, in using the internet in any way, shape, or fashion, using TOR is in itself a best practice. Nothing's perfect, okay? But there are things that do, I think, genuinely work, and we're better off doing that, and at the very least making it, using TOR at the very least makes it more expensive for whatever regime or alphabet soup organization. It makes it expensive for them to do their job, and that is a very fine and dandy thing, and a form of activism to do against tyranny. Just to put it right there, that exists in this world. So that's what I got. Now, okay, we are over an hour, so I know I told you I'd get to the BDSM question this week. I'm going to have to push it off to next week. I will make it the first question. It's what we'll open right up with, and we're gonna ride with it. Maybe I could even have Ellen on for it. We'll see. Okay, for album of the week, got to give you a quick album of the week here. And this is a bit of a weird one. This is by a guy who I've been a fan of for many, many years, decades now. And that is Till Lindemann. Now, you might not know Till Lindemann, but you probably know who he's the lead singer of. And that is Rammstein. Yeah, du hast, Till Lindemann has been doing, this is his second album. It just came out. He has done a couple solo albums now. His first one was pretty good. This one sounds very much like classic Rammstein. And I mean classic Rammstein, like as in around Sehnsucht, or Herz. No, wait, what was the name? Was that Herzleid? Was that the name of the album? I guess it was Herzleid. That was the first album. Sounds very much in that vein. I thought, and again, it's called F&M is just, it's Frau und Mann. My German's rough. But F&M is the name of the album, and he just goes by, he doesn't self-title it Till Lindemann. It's just Lindemann. That's what he does. That's the band name, I guess you could say, he goes with. But this is a good, solid, like 12 tracks that you're going to have a great time with. If you're a Rammstein fan at all, you're going to love this. He gets a little more experimental than Rammstein is often willing to go. And he's a little more serious, and I appreciate that, because I think sometimes Rammstein gets into the comical, which is fine, because they're over the top by nature. But I really dug. I was listening to this at the gym the other day. F&M, check it out by Lindemann. It's Lindemann, like Till Lindemann. And good time. So anyway, there's an album of the week for you. I'm going to wrap this baby up. You got more Sovereign Tech episodes coming out in pretty short order, and we got other stuff to come out throughout the month of November, even though we are approaching the end. I can't believe how fast these months go. But we'll wrap this one up, and I will see all of you on the other side.